evening, everyone. Welcome to the council and welcome to this workshop number 3. My name is Julie Villard. I'm the Eco Design Advisor from the council, and I'm really pleased to host tonight this amazing event. To be frank, so tonight we're going to talk about windows, and windows is a little bit like my little thing. When I arrived in Europe, when I arrived here from Europe 5 years ago, I was brainwashed. So I'm really pleased to host such an event. Right, a little bit of housekeeping rules. If you need to go to the bathroom, you go through the doors and it's on your left. If there is an earthquake or such a big event, please cover your head because there's a couple of tiles that might fall over, and run with me through the door this way. The meeting point will be in front of the art gallery, just after the ramp. And if there is a fire, we're probably going to be shut down by some curtains, fire curtains, so the exit way is the same through these little doors. I welcome Bob Burnett, who's going to present all what's going to happen this evening. Thank you very much.
Can people hear me at the back? Hi everybody, welcome along, and thanks Julie. So Julie didn't mention, but when she came to New Zealand, she worked for me for 5 years, and she's from the future. So this evening is about a window into the future. So I'm actually going to Europe end of this month, and Julie said, "You're going to the future," but I said, "No, I'm not. I'm actually going to the present. I'm travelling from the past to the present." So welcome, and just if I can have a bit of a indication tonight who's here and what's your interest. So homeowners, and keep your hand up. So keep your hand up if you're building or thinking about building. And who's in the industry? Designers, architects, and builders. Yep, good. So it's 50-50. So hopefully we can get the mix right, and you're not going to be too bored and your eyes aren't going to glaze over when we delve into the technical details. But I'm going to talk a little bit first up about the SUPERHOME movement. And is the volume okay? Yep. Cool. And just an update on what we're doing with the SUPERHOME movement. Who went on the tours? Awesome. Yeah, so, and has anyone been to any of these workshops previously? Great. Yeah, so it's a good opportunity to sort of look at some of the details of the homes post-tour, and this is the third workshop. So we had the previous one was on panel systems and prefabrication, and that was really popular. And obviously tonight we're looking at windows, my favourite topic. Because windows are really important, because even though they might be sort of 10% of the building envelope, it can be sort of 40-50% of the heat loss. So it's a big problem, the fact that in New Zealand we're doing pretty suboptimal windows compared to overseas. So first of all, SUPERHOME movement. Don't know if you can read that, but so we started off doing real stuff, just ground up, and trying to educate people and influence people's decision making when it comes to choosing what to build. And we thought, well, we're not going to wait for the government to improve the building code, because we thought that's unlikely to happen anytime soon, and if it does, it's probably going to be small incremental changes, and it's not going to improve to where it needs to be overnight, because in comparison to other countries, better countries, we're about a third of where we need to be, particularly when it comes to the thermal performance. But Windows is no exception. We're probably around 20, 25 years out of date with our Windows and how we're installing them flush instead of recessing them into the warm part of the wall. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I can remember I was at a Passive House conference in Auckland about 3 years ago. It's an international conference, and there was people from Europe and the States and Japan, and a picture went up on the screen by one of the Kiwi presenters of the New Zealand Building Code window detail, and I watched the jaws drop, and they went, "Oh my God, is that how you do windows?" We stopped doing that 25 years ago. So a couple of events that are happening. So we've got a tour in Auckland, end of this month. The 29th and the 30th is the self-guided tours. So you hop in your car and you go to whatever houses you want to visit. The 28th is an industry bus tour, which has been a lot of fun that we've done in Christchurch 3 years in a row. So we're doing one in Auckland. So basically the format is early in the morning, everybody gathers, hops on a bus and goes around half a dozen houses, have lunch, middle of the day, and then we have the obligatory drinks at the end of the day. And it's a very popular event. That's on the 28th. So it's a bit of a challenge, Auckland, but what we're planning on doing is doing several tours where we have clusters of houses in different neighbourhoods and breaking it up. So pop-up tours rather than in Christchurch. We had 12 homes that were open for 3 weekends. It was a bit of a marathon, but it worked well in Christchurch. We can't do that in Auckland, obviously, because of the logistics. So, and even Christchurch, we might, instead of having an annual tour, we might start to do them more regularly, and because it's a long time to wait, a year, if you want to find out about what makes a super home. So, just on that, there is some leftover guides to creating a super home. So this is the map, which is out of date now, but on the back of the map, good information there, but half the audience has already been on the tour, you've probably already seen that. But yeah. Okay, so I'll introduce Yvette. So Yvette is our new Supergirl. And so if you're interested in joining the Superhome movement, you'll be talking to Yvette. And I hear today we've just had 4 people confirm that they're joining, so that's fantastic. So it's growing rapidly. And so we needed some help so I could get back to my day job. And Yvette has stepped up. So now, I mentioned I'm going to Europe. Thank you very much, courtesy of NK Windows and LU Players. They've sponsored me to go over there and do a talk. And it's a bit ironical, really, because me talking to Europeans about Windows, it's in Cardiff. And it's kind of like, they're a proud rugby nation. It's probably a bit like them coming over here and trying to tell the All Blacks how to play rugby. But I'll be over there to learn more than anything, and just share the experience with the Superhome movement and the journey, what we've learned over the last 3 years doing that. So we're starting to get more and more noticed. So just in the last couple of 3 weeks, we've had quite a bit of press. We're in the Herald, which I think is read by about 1 million people, which is probably the most read publication. We've also had a piece in Habitat magazine, cover feature in Style magazine, and we've got, it's a long way away, but next year we've filmed for a documentary which will be screened early next year. So the message is starting to get out there, and it's really important because basically, you've been on the tour, you've seen what we've been talking about with building better homes, so you know why we need better homes. Our homes are making us sick. And so there's a really strong why to what we're doing. Key thing is knowing the right people to talk to. The Superhome participants is a good start. So on our reasonably new website, which is changing all the time because we launched it early for the tour before it was finished. There's who, so you can know who to talk to, architects, designers, builders, suppliers, and there's some good information there. So, and the events section is a good thing to look at, so you can keep up to date, up to speed with what's happening in events like what we're doing tonight, and future events. So we're about to launch next year the accreditation. So it's very important to know who knows their stuff, basically, and so there'll be accreditation training and accreditation for super architects, super builders, super suppliers. So you know, a lot of people say, yeah, I know all about that stuff, but they don't, because you know, even brands' own research shows that pretty much we're almost entirely building code to code. We're using the code as a target. So even the award-winning architectural homes, a lot of them are pretty poor performing when it comes to the performance of those. So that's enough on that. So, hope you can all read that. I wrote to Phil Twyford after, I mentioned this previously, but I sort of got enough confidence to write to Phil, the Minister of Housing, after winning an award for the Sustainable Business Network. 5 months later, he wrote back to me and he said, thank you, and he said, I'm all for improving building standards, but not at the expense of housing affordability. And he said that we can already build beyond code. And I just thought, yeah, right, but nobody does, so he hasn't quite got it. But good thing is, my counterpart in Auckland, Andre, had a meeting with Phil Twyford last week and told him all about the SUPERHOME movement, and he's very enthusiastic. There was a lot of nodding, and he said, I can talk about that in my speeches. So yeah, that's good. Also, just last week, we had quite a good meeting right here at the council with the Christchurch City Council councillors, just probably upstairs above this room, and we were talking about some of the initiatives that we're planning, and that was very well received, and they said we wish there was more people here, and they invited us back to a full meeting with everybody. So we're actually starting to get the opportunity to have a bit of impact from the top, as well as just doing the real stuff from the bottom as well. So that's promising. So how to get involved? So you can become a participant. So $500, and it's renewed annually if you're working in the industry. You can become a supporter, so that's anyone, you guys that are just homeowners that are wanting to support what we're doing and enjoying the ride and learning about how to get a super home. That's $85. So partners, that's really the industry players that want to sponsor what we're doing and to help us. Without those guys like NK Windows, Eco Panel, Jib, so forth, we can't really do what we do, and we can't exist. Influencers, this is more people like Christchurch City Council and brands and people that aren't really providing a service or a product, but they're interested and able to assist and influence what we're doing. Follower, student member. So yeah, get involved. All right, Windows. So I think this was the first super home. This was the 10-star home in Church Square, which most people have probably heard about because it's been really overexposed. And people are still interested in it. Yeah, I think a small space with the windows in the right place can really add to the feel. And you know, you sort of borrow the outdoor space if you've designed it right with the windows in the right place. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about, I'll just mention Homestar. Homestar have sponsored the tours this year and also Auckland, and they've subsidised the Homestar rating. So every home has a Homestar rating on the tour. So that's been really good, really interesting. And Brands have sponsored the Auckland tour, so thank you, Brands. And JIB, Eco Panel, Christchurch City Council are an awesome council, so allowing us to use their venue, but also just actively assisting us with the tours, and they get it. They have shown some forward thinking and some leadership. I talk to other councils and I tell them what Christchurch has done and tell them to pull their socks up. So, but what we're doing with the Superhome movement is really what they want to see. They want to see residents get into better homes because we're living in substandard homes that are too cold and are making us sick. So there's an upside for everybody. So thank you very much, Christchurch City Council, and Tony Moore, he's amazing, Julie. Now, there's quite a few words there. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think about in just windows, but there's a lot to think about in designing and building a super home or just a good home. And obviously performance is what we focus on, but I really think that the windows, I think it was Julie who told me that sort of the roof is the fifth wall, so it's really important to the look of the house, but windows, I mean, they have a big influence on what the house looks like as well as the performance and the aesthetics of the home. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the quality of light and getting sun into the home. The number one request, if you ask someone what they want in a home, they say they want a sunny home. But you can have windows that are too big and let in too much sun, so it overheats. Or if you've got big windows, you've still got heat loss too. So that's what I mean by it's an art and it's a science. And it's the getting the right space, the right feel, the right function, as well as as much as it is the performance. So there's a lot of trade-offs. And I'll just go through these because it's important. The obvious one is, it's easy to make a warm house, but it's more difficult to keep it cool. So you've got to think about shading, really important, often missed. So you've got to have larger, oversized eaves, larger than what most people are doing in terms of eaves. And so you've got the right shading. And ventilation, ventilation is probably the skeleton in the closet in New Zealand building. We don't really do it. 5%, the building code says 5% of the area opening windows. Well, sorry, that doesn't work. But you really need mechanical ventilation, particularly with houses getting more and more airtight. So ventilation is important, but you can actually achieve ventilation also by having the windows in the right places and having cross ventilation, or having some lower opening windows on the cool side and higher opening windows on the warm side, and getting a bit of a stack effect. So the other ones, obviously weather tightness. 9 times out of 10 when a building leaks, it's going to leak where the openings are because you've got different things joining together. So that's really important. And maybe some of the following speakers will talk about some of those technical details a bit more. Durability, buildability, compliance. So we're here at the council, but we might have an open and frank discussion about compliance and how we do different window details that aren't part of the acceptable solution of the building code, and some of the obstacles to doing that. And if anybody's got any questions from the sort of designers and builders in the room, I'll just hand that over to Julie, because that's her department. Sorry, Julie.
Thanks.
So compliance, cost, buildability, cost, return on investment. does it make sense to actually spend a little bit more on having better windows? Yes, it does. Even though it's more expensive, it'll pay off pretty quickly too. But the thing I notice about good quality windows is it feels better. You're not up against a cold surface. You've got comfort as well as efficiency. So I'll just keep moving. So you might have this is probably a good example of shading. So we've got probably a 3.5 metre space here, and once I show you the next slide and you see the view, you'll see why we've got so much class. But here we've got two eaves, so we've got a lower, this sort of eyebrow eave. If we just had the top one, there would be nowhere near enough shading to protect this from overheating. So that was kind of my idea there, and the owner tells me it works perfectly and it doesn't overheat. But it's in this environment where you really want to be taking advantage of the view, and that's the view. I don't know if you can see that on the slide, but it looks to Akarai Harbour. So there's trade-offs. There's a lot of things to consider, and you might have a view to the south. So how do you deal with that? You've got to make sure that you get that right. Just the quality of light inside. So here we've got there's a mezzanine sort of back behind here, but you can see we've got high level windows, and up the top here. Sorry, I'm blinding someone with a laser pointer. But up the top here we've got this sort of floating roof, but there's an overhang, over a metre overhang in two directions, so it doesn't overheat in there, even though there's all those windows, and it just gives you this uplifting feeling of even on a day when it's not sunny, you're never going to be feeling down in there, because it's got this amazing feel to it. And okay, so this is my house, which I'm still waiting to be repaired 8 years later. But I talk about this, but I make a point of mentioning this because it's not okay, and there's still 5,500 people that haven't been paid their insurance in Christchurch for the houses that were damaged 8 years ago. So, but that's a whole other story. The thing about this house is this was built about 3-4 years before the earthquakes. So it was it had low E glazing. So low E glazing. It's the glass. It's better quality. And it was at the time it was difficult to get thermally broken window frames. So I talk about this house having lots of thermally broken features, thermally broken foundations, and now it's got properly broken foundations after the earthquake. But you can see here, this is there's a view out this side, so there's an amazing amount of glass here because you've got this amazing view up the top of the Fort Hills. But you need that. But the problem here in terms of seismic performance is the centre of mass is probably somewhere near the back of this big stone, inner stone wall here. So there's a lot of load, there's a lot of forces around that glazing, and if I was going to, everything's changed after earthquakes. If I was going to build a house like this today, I'd have steel portals there, so that it stands up to the earthquakes. But even on the hill, the biggest bracing requirement isn't earthquake; it's actually wind. So this is in an extra high wind zone. So you've got to build better for the wind as well. And windows, there's a lot to think about. The longevity, weather tightness. I'll just keep moving. So this house here, I talked about having the windows. Again, we've got an eyebrow here. So I talked about the opening windows to release the heat. So there's these little windows at the top here. So if it gets too warm in here, there's a electric opener, so you can open the windows at the back and you've got cross ventilation. There's windows low down here, and there's a lot of thermal mass in this house. There's a thermal break through here at the doors so that you're not getting cold through the foundation. So that was a house that I lived in after the earthquake, and there's my 3-year-old who's now 10, and that was the first time I'd seen snow, so he was fascinated by that. So this is the house I live in now, and we're doing a super reno. So we're going to upgrade these windows, because even though I've gone through the ECA Warm Up New Zealand scheme and didn't really work. So I've put polythene on the ground, I've put bats under the floor, I've put more bats in the roof, and it's still 5 degrees inside these front bedrooms without heating on. So we've got to do better than that. Even our new houses can be single digits in the bedrooms. So we've got this kind of obsession with just heating one room instead of heating the whole house. So this is going to get a major reno, and it'll get the walls insulated and new windows. And we need to be doing this because we've got about 1 million unhealthy homes. We're not going to solve our problems by just building new homes better. So there's a real need to be renovated. And I think that's, when I go on my study tour to UK and Europe, I'm going to be looking at how they renovate their old houses, because they've got houses that stick around for hundreds of years. So that's important. Where your windows are really depends on the context. And here, obviously, this is in the mountains. This is really cold, but so we've got a different requirement. Who knows who that is? Frank Gehry. So he sort of famously once said 98% of what gets built today is shit. After some heckling and people saying, well, why don't you build something sensible instead of these show-off, look-at-me buildings? But I kind of think this really makes more sense nowhere more so than in New Zealand, because pretty much that's 98% of what we're building is built to code. So, we've been really polite with what we've been doing with the SUPERHOME movement and showing people the aspirational standard and how to do better. But we probably, I don't make any apologies for pointing out substandard buildings. So here we've got some social housing, we've got 30 units on Blenheim Road, and they're facing a 4-lane road with lots of noise, trucks. We've got this cell phone zombie here who's standing here waiting to jump in front of this truck, probably because he lives in an unhealthy house. Shouldn't joke about that, but if we look at this house, south-facing glass, there's never going to be any sun coming in these windows, just heat loss and a sound problem. And come on, we should be doing better than this. This here, 1906, yeah, but this here, we're doing the same thing. It's the taxpayers' money. We should stop that. So I might get unpopular, but I think it's important to point out when we're doing things that are not good. And the reason I'm sort of pointing this out is directly across from the 10-star home in Addington is some more of these units, exactly the same. That's a good day when there's rubbish, you got your rubbish bins by your front door, but usually there's rubbish on the ground, there's a broken window there, condensation, mould. The then Prime Minister, John Key, raved about how these were the latest and greatest and the way forward for the rebuild. We need to educate the politicians, because they don't know. We can't expect them to be experts in building, but they're not doing their job at the moment. The building code is supposed to be a level of protection for us. It's failing. It's not doing what it should do. This is what I think the building code is. But it's a target. It's what the industry aspires to. We need to realise what it is. It's the worst possible house that we can legally build. And what is this? Oh my God. I'm sorry, whoever did that. Well, I'm not sorry. We shouldn't be doing this. This is like a failed social experiment. You know, they might be able to, might make a good creche or something with those colours. So recessed windows. I think they just look better as well as perform better. And they're not new. My villa's got recessed windows. It's just somewhere 30, 40 years ago we decided we'll flush mount windows. We also decided that we'll custom make every window and measure it on site. The rest of the world has a catalogue of windows and you have like sizes for windows. That's got to be a more affordable way of doing windows rather than custom making every window. But somewhere, 30, 40 years ago, someone decided that's going to be the way to do it. Maybe they thought they could make more money doing it that way, I don't know. And every window is flush. So I think brands do research on housing quality every 3 or 4 years, and they researched houses, Christchurch, Auckland, Hamilton, I don't know whether it was 200 or 300 houses, but they got all the documents. Only one of those houses had windows that weren't flush mounted, standard, double glazed aluminium. So we're not doing very well, but it's standard practice overseas to recess the windows, and it can be quite nice architecturally to do that. I've already talked about some sad stories, so I'll just brush over that one. It's another sad story. But anyone recognise that? That's our building code detail for a window. So sorry if you don't understand drawings, but I'll explain it. So the red, the pink is the warm part of the wall, the blue is the cladding cavity, which is for drainage and ventilation of the cladding, so it has cold air in it. And that is where our window is, flush, overlapping the cladding. So it's just common sense that where the cold meets the warm, you know, moist, warm air hits the cold surface, then there's going to be condensation. And guess what? That's just where our glass is. And we've got a little channel at the bottom to collect that condensation, and then we've drilled holes through that aluminium so that condensation can drain outside. What makes it even worse is we've got a warm support bar here, which is another cold sink. You know, you use those things as heat sinks in computers to dissipate the heat. So, but here it's a highway for thermal bridging for the cold. There's a better way. Recess the windows, sits on the frame, you don't need a support bar. You don't need a channel for condensation that isn't any condensation. Don't have to go through that ritual of wiping down the windows so that it doesn't get mouldy. So that's not a thermally broken window because the warm part of the wall is back here. So the thermal break is still in the cold part of the wall. This one's slightly better because the thermal break's further back, but it's still outside the thermal envelope of the wall. We need to install our windows inside the thermal envelope of the wall. Hopefully you get that. So Europeans been doing it for a long time. That's a heavily recessed window. That's the Church Square one, which I think was the first house that we recessed the windows, and I think it was the first time we used the PVC NK windows. And we've pretty much used them for everything since almost. So what's important? Here's a drawing of the recessed window, but double glazing. There's double glazing and there's double glazing. So the right spacer. So you don't want a piece of aluminium between that's not a thermally broken window. It's a piece of aluminium between the two pieces of glass. So you want the plastic spacer of some sort. You know, thermally broken aluminium windows are okay. PVC. Non-conductive inherently, so that's good. The glass, low E. So low E is, you know, you can now get a new type of low E. The Church Square house had low E XL, which was the best you could get at the time. I think low E Extreme, it's probably 50% better performance. 50%. So that's going to make the biggest difference. It's the biggest area, the glass. So it's going to make a huge difference. Argon, 10%. It's cheap. We do it. It doesn't matter, of course. And the R value of the windows is 4 times what building code is. And then recessing them into the wall. Do you know just recessing your window into the wall, that gives you 20 to 30% better performance? Bang, just there, without even doing a better window. It's just how you install the window. So Japan, I went to Japan late last year. They had a big earthquake around about the same time as we did in Christchurch. A week later, the big problem for them was a tsunami and a meltdown of their nuclear power station. So they've really pulled their socks up in terms of how they live in Japan. 75% of their homes are net zero energy. Standard is triple glazed thermally broken windows or PVC. Some of their windows, they're a bit different to the Europeans even. They've got aluminium and then a small amount of PVC on the inside. So, but they do some different stuff, and you know, they have shutters that come down. They have insect screens that come across. It's all airtight, acoustically sealed. It's all quite good. So I've spoken enough. I'm going to hand over to Martin. Martin's going to talk about all the good things that he talks about, and then we're going to have a little break and have a drink before two more speakers. So we're going to hear from Brands. Sorry, I should have introduced the lineup, but John Burgess from Brands, Martin Ball from NK Windows is next, and then Simone is from Massey University, is going to talk about a research project that she's doing on Windows. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just wing it. How hard can it be? I did go to Massey University, so how hard can it be?
Which one is yours?
We'll sit here on we'll sit here on the desktop.
Here we go.
There we go, fantastic. All right, I'm going to talk a little about Windows. So we've all got our window horror stories, and this is my window horror story. I was staying with a friend of mine in Easter this year. He's got a small sleep out at the back of his house, probably about 10 square metres. 4 of us sleeping in it overnight, so 2 adult children, 2 adults breathing and doing whatever we're doing all night. And this is what we woke up to the next morning. So relatively cool outside, I think 4 or 5 degrees, but water just dripping off the frames. Those frames were, I suspect, about 6 months old. He'd just done the renovation. You can already see, there's a little pointy arrow thing here. Is it right?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, you can already see the mould forming on the inside of the frame there. There's just no need for it. There just isn't any need for this, right? So the rest of the world has kind of moved on. So we know that Windows, and Bob's done a good overview, I think, in terms of just kind of the architectural side of it, but from a, just talk a little bit about the physics of it a little bit more perhaps. Obviously we need light, we need ventilation, it helps control temperature. Increasingly very important in terms of acoustics. So one of the things that's kind of interesting at the moment in terms of kind of industry trends, we're seeing a lot more requirements coming through around the acoustic requirements for Windows. And that can be enhanced by the choice of frame material and also the types of glasses that you put into those windows as well. We can talk a bit more about that as we go along. So I think of Windows as having kind of 3 major components to them. The kind of the frame and the hardware, the glass, and interesting, I probably spend as a PVC window provider, I spend probably more time talking about the glass than I do about the frame in terms of the glazing options and the impacts that have on shading, acoustics, privacy, all those sorts of things. And Bob did a good intro to the installation. We'll talk a little bit more about how, at least how we do it. So purchased the business 5 years ago off the previous owners, and the last 3 years especially with the involvement through the SUPERHOME has been a hell of a ride. in terms of understanding what the kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly is. Really fascinating. Just talk about recessed frames as we go through it. But rang up my German suppliers a couple of years ago and said, "Oh, we're thinking about getting a bit more involved in recessing frames back into the building structure." And there was a bit of a stunned silence on the end of the phone, and it was there was a bit of muttering in German and a bit of, "What the hell do you do now?" So a few years later, here we are. So a little bit of science. You'll hear U and R, and I'm just assuming most people are kind of comfortable with these definitions, but just in case you're not. U value measure of thermal resistance. R value measure of thermal resistance. U value the heat transfer coefficient. So basically the inverse of each other. Okay. So if you just look at a bad wall, which is kind of probably something inside with that sort of stuff, R value is around 2.1, 2.2. Something like an insulated panel up to 4, 4.5, even higher. Okay, so just keep that number in mind when we start looking at windows. If even a really, really, really good window is struggling to be half as good as a really bad wall, right? Just keep that in mind. So frame materials, you've probably got three kind of main choices, right? So aluminium, which is fairly traditional in New Zealand for a whole bunch of reasons. PVC, increasingly popular and growing, and certainly popular globally, and wooden windows as well. A bit more expense involved in those, but certainly also perform very well thermally. So if we look at aluminium, a really basic aluminium window is going to, so I'm just struggling to find the button with the glasses, here we go. A really basic non-thermally broken aluminium window with real basic double glazing. R value in around the kind of 0.2, 0.3 sort of range. Okay, so remember we're talking about bad walls being 2.2, 2.4. Up to, I think the best, and you guys will be able to speak better to this than me, I'm not the aluminium expert, but if you're wildly lucky up into the 0.7, 0.8 range with good triple glazing, thermally broken, decent air gaps in amongst the glazing, that's probably about the best you can stretch an aluminium window. Really interesting, we had our German suppliers down a couple of months ago and took them through the Home Ideas Centre just to kind of show them the competition. They go, "Geez, you guys make really good aluminium windows in New Zealand." So we do have a good aluminium window industry in terms of the way the windows are constructed, the choices and the configurations and things like that. So, readily available, a large range of openings. You can make them all sorts of colours that you like. Relatively low maintenance. A reasonable story in terms of recycling, but relatively poor thermally. Can be enhanced, of course, as we talked about with thermally broken. Relatively poor acoustically, and a lot of what they call, if you're a bit of an eco warrior, a lot of embodied energy. So it's taken a lot of energy to refine, get the bauxite to the southern end of New Zealand there, fire up all the power plants, turn that into some aluminium billets that can be then extruded and turned into the profiles. So there's a lot of energy involved in making a aluminium window. PVC, no apologies here for my favourite subject. One of the most common frame materials worldwide, high thermal efficiency. Interestingly, very good acoustically as well. So a softer material, and the combination of the material and the way it's sealed improves the acoustics. So up to 45 dB in terms of what it can achieve acoustically, in terms of blocking out sound in a really thick, well-sealed frame. Again, still kind of limited supply at the moment, still in New Zealand, but interestingly that a couple of the major aluminium suppliers are now offering PVC as part of their product ranges. So that's a really interesting shift in what is the dominant frame material in Europe. Still a fair bit of energy involved in producing PVC. It is a petrochem byproduct at the end of the day, a plastic. Relatively recyclable, and of course the big question everyone asks about PVC, and I think I've had the question 3 times already tonight, is the UV, right? So I was just telling the story to someone tonight. When I bought this business 5 years ago, my father was a builder from kind of 30, 40 years ago. He remembers Marley roof spouting, and he kind of went, "Really, a plastic window company? Are you kidding me?" Good news, the clever Germans have solved the problem. So the additives that go into the PVC are critical in terms of, so the percentage of titanium dioxide, which is like putting kind of sunblock on your PVC, is really critical. Too much, you can't extrude it. but you need enough in there to make sure that it binds and is highly reflective as well. So lighter coloured frames are a lot better in terms of putting into building structures. Darker colours will absorb a bit more heat and move a little bit more. So there is a trade-off there. But the UV issue is resolved in terms of stability. But it does mean that because PVC moves a lot more inside a building structure, you are sometimes a little bit more limited in terms of sizes you can achieve with a PVC frame. Not necessarily a bad thing. Wood or wood composites, again, can achieve quite good R values up into the kind of 1.2, 1.3 for a decent sized frame. I can see a pretty meaty looking one down there with triple glazing. Very good thermal efficiency, lower embodied energy, so probably a better kind of total energy story. Sustainability, a bit of a question mark. There's an argument kind of brewing in Europe around basically we're bowling all the ecosystems to put up these sustainable forests. So yeah, interesting story going on there. Still a bit of a premium price in New Zealand in terms of getting good stable wood here and processed and turned into good window frames. And by good I mean, you know, decent seals, decent hardware, things that contribute to the whole window, not just the frame material. Just a few things to consider in terms of hardware. It's an interesting one. When we bought this business, of course, the first thing I noticed when I walked in the showroom was everyone's opening windows, and Julie's kind of going, "Yeah, okay, that's what we're used to." What's so crazy about that? Actually designed originally to make cleaning windows easy in European apartment blocks, basically. And so the Europeans are used to that. When they took their PVC systems to the rest of the world, discovered that they were mostly outwards opening windows, and so have had to adapt their systems accordingly. But they the beauty is you've got the choice of both. Certainly the hardware solutions in an inwards opening window, both whether wooden or PVC, are very good in terms of multi-point locking, multi-sealing. So some of that stuff adds to both the wear tightness, the acoustic performance, and the air tightness as well, and the security. So again, in terms of offering natural ventilation, that's a secure stay on a tilt window. You can go out and leave that window open during the day, no one can break in. There's not something you can put your arm in and undo. But they have had to adapt their systems into outwards opening systems as they've moved out of mainland Europe as well. Probably just a wee comment on doors. In New Zealand, we love our big sliders and we love our big bifolds. We've got the nice warm weather. We want to open up the backs of our houses. In Europe, it's interesting, they'll spend €4,000 or €5,000 on a really, really nice front door. We'll spend the same amount of money in New Zealand doors around the back into our living areas. A simple hinged door with a multi-point locking is still the cheapest, the easiest to maintain, and one of the most airtight doors. As you start getting into sliders, they're notoriously difficult to seal. And so there are some ways of doing that by lifting doors and pulling door frames, sashes off the main frame before you move it, rather than just running it past a brush seal to ensure that you get a good airtight seal on a slider. So there's ways of doing it, but the hardware prices start to elevate to achieve that seal. Bifolds, notoriously difficult to construct and maintain and seal. There's just a lot of moving parts. It's mechanically no more complex than that. There's just a lot of bits. So again, doable. Interestingly, I moved into a house a couple of years ago with a bifold door, and I was keen to kind of see how often I used it. And Christchurch, of course, we've got this notorious easterly, so I thought, during summer that'll be interesting to see how often I use that bifold door. Actually, remarkably a lot. But I talk to people a lot about bifolds, and I say, think carefully about how often you're going to live with your windows and doors wide open, because it's a lot of expense and a lot of trade-off to achieve a bifold door. So, glazing's an interesting one. So in New Zealand, glazing, we're crawling up the curve incredibly slowly. So air gap is important. Not a lot of people realise that. So there's an optimum air gap between panes of glass. Get a little bit too wide, you start getting convectional cooling inside the glass unit. Too narrow, you're not getting enough insulation. Increasing the air density in there is key. So argon, krypton, xenon gas all helps in terms of improving the thermal performance. Bob mentioned warm edge spaces. Yep, absolutely. We don't want to see any metal in there at all. What that's doing effectively is cooling the edge of the glass and increasing the chances of both conduction and condensation on the internal panes and things like that. Okay, so at least a warm edge or a super spacer, which is a softer spacer.
That's a good name.
Super spacer, yeah. So the glass company's struggling with the super spacer a little bit in terms of because it's softer, stabilising the panes of glass and keeping them rigid, and also there's some concerns about gas leakage through some of the super spacers as well. So I think that's still kind of that technology is emerging, but it improves what they call the psi value, which is across through that spacer by about 20-30% going from a warm edge spacer to a super spacer, and that improves again the thermal performance of the glass. Triple glazing, I think there's only one, I think I'm right in saying Tim Foster, there's only one automated triple glazing line in New Zealand, and interestingly it's not one of the two major glass manufacturers. So double glazing has become relatively competitive in New Zealand because it's pretty much automated now in terms of toughening and joining those two panes of glass. So just so people are aware, no glass gets made in New Zealand. We stopped making glass in New Zealand a long time ago, I don't know how long ago. The glass all comes in from overseas, mostly from places where there's lots of sand. What we do is join it together, toughen it, evacuate the gap in the middle and put in argon gas and super spacers and stuff like that. Right, so there's a lot of wastage in the glass industry actually. I think they budget on something like a 10% wastage because of all that glass coming in from overseas, getting busted somewhere between when it leaves Saudi Arabia and when it ends up inside your house. So not terribly efficient as an industry. And triple glazing, so still a heck of a premium. So something like a 2.5 times the price for kind of the best triple glazing I can get and stick inside our windows versus double glazing for about a 40% improvement in thermal performance. So my general advice in terms of when you start thinking about triple glazing, I think that's probably the point at which you start getting someone involved who understands the modelling around the thermal envelope a lot more. Because at that point, you're starting to get R values up towards the wall, still not anywhere near as good as a bad wall, but you're starting to trade off that insulation versus the thermal gain. So I sort of, when people come to me and say, how can I make my window better? I kind of facetiously say, make it smaller. Because obviously the wall is still a heck of a lot better than the window. You know, unless you're a bit of an exhibitionist, do you really need that full height glass window in your ensuite on the south side of your house? Really, you know. Low E and argon, so I know when I'm preaching to the converter, or people kind of understand how low E works. So it's a clear, effectively plastic coating on the inside layer of the glass. Some debate whether it is better on layer 2 or layer 3 of the glass. So if that's the outside, that's the inside. Layer 1, 2, 3, 4. So one glass supplier in New Zealand prefers layer 2. One glass supplier in New Zealand prefers layer 3. Layer 3 arguably better at keeping heat inside. Layer 2 slightly better at keeping heat outside. Still work in both directions, right? So the key to the low E coating is it's letting through different wavelengths of light and heat. Okay, so lets light through, so you get solar gain. There's a little bit of loss of solar gain as it hits a low E coating, but the big gain is keeping the heat inside the glass. And then when we triple glaze, imagine another pane of glass there, we also coat what they call layer 5. So double low E coatings, 2 cavities of argon, and you can start to see the gain in R value of the glass there. So it's quite a jump in performance. So typical installation, as we've seen, so yeah, lift it off the New Zealand standards. So gap in the cavity, aluminium sitting out in that cavity, one spar supporting that. Typically reveal fixed, so fasten the reveal to the main aluminium frame, fasten through the reveal, and an exterior flange. And that's the model we've got there, just sitting next to it. So we've got a couple of different details that we use. This is just a clip-on sill version where we add another extrusion to the main window frame. And that allows us, and that's welded on all the corners as well, the same as the framers. So that allows us to pull that frame back into the insulation line. So there's the cool air layer through there. There's the edge of it there. And the modelling we've done says as soon as that face there hits there, there's about a 15% improvement in the thermal performance, because you've now, the whole frame is surrounded by a warm wall, rather than part of the frame sitting out in the cavity and surrounded by cold air. Right? And then there's a slight gain as you pull that frame further back into the centre of the insulation line, which is about the optimum. You get about an 18% gain in thermal performance there. So not a lot of big difference. The key is to get that, the front face. Again, it's the modelling we did was with the film modelling we did was with PVC. I suspect it's even greater with aluminium. It'd be interesting to see. I don't know whether you guys are doing any film modelling around that, but kind of thought it would be really interesting to see what those numbers are. So that's all about installation. What does the future hold? Certainly more energy efficient frames. So if you like, current technology in Europe is a deeper frame. So sorry, the frame's going to get a bit bulkier. It's the bulkiness of the frame that gives it its thermal performance, right? It's the numbers of cavities, up to a certain point, beyond which there's no big gain. So the optimum, or the maximum, is somewhere in that kind of 85, 90 millimetre thick across there. Removing the steel from the inner core of the PVC frame. So at the moment we put steel reinforcing in to give the PVC frame strength and to fasten the hardware to. That's out. It's an injected foam core. It's co-extruded fiberglass fins. And you'll see there the model between, that's the current frame we use in New Zealand, so the 4000 series. It's a 70mm system. You'll see there the isotherm line. As that steel comes out, which is that part there and that part there, as that comes out, those isotherms move across. So again, another 20-25% gain when you pull that cold steel out of the centre of the frame. So a similar thing as you would expect if you were talking about an aluminium frame. So cheaper triple glazing, certainly as glass companies upgrade and automate the production of their glass units. There's certainly better low E coatings around, and again it's a volume game. So as we get smarter and demand that from those suppliers, there's opportunities to improve there. And it's krypton, not kryptonite. I think kryptonite's the Superman stuff. Krypton gas and xenon, so higher density gases than argon. Still inert, still perfectly safe. Krypton would be more typical in Europe as a gas in a glass cavity. And that's probably more than enough talking from me. Thank you.
Auckland Massey University, and I'm in my final year of my Bachelor of Construction. And I was approached by one of our lecturers, my supervisor, Professor Robin Phipps, to do my research project on the thermal performance of windows creating net zero energy housing. At first, I was a little bit, windows, I didn't have a lot of knowledge and a lot of appreciation for windows and how important they are in our homes. And so what we decided to do is do a little bit of research, and Bob and Ed, thank you very much for helping us recruit homes. So we came down to Christchurch and started looking at 5 homes, and so we looked at 5 homes and we monitored these 5 homes, their windows. So it's a different variety of homes with all different windows, and we placed these little eye buttons in all of the homes in the living room and the most southern bedroom. We chose the living room because it's usually the warmest room of your house, and we chose the most southern bedroom because it is the coldest room of your house. And then we placed these little eye buttons on the glass and the frame and also on the wall very close to the ground, and just compared the temperature difference across these 3 different components. So we did this for 2 weeks, and for those 2 weeks we took 15-minute interval readings of the temperature and the relative humidity of these 3 components. And it was very interesting what we found. But first, looking at some background information, I did a lot of background research, and what I kept coming back to was insulation, heating and cooling, and ventilation. But we were mainly focusing on heating instead of cooling for this experiment. So when we look at insulation, you want to think about insulation for all your walls and your roof. A lot of people nowadays kind of just look at insulating their roofs because heat rises and they think that that's going to solve the problem. But you also need very good insulation in your building envelope. So when thinking about heat, you should think about heat as flowing water. It will look for any kind of gap, any area, any opening where it can escape, which is what we're trying to prevent. So windows is essentially a big hole in your building thermal envelope. So then we started looking further at heating, but we looked at the New Zealand code and just found that it's not up to scratch and it's not comparing to what the rest of the world is currently doing and their standards. So what the World Health Organization recommends is that your house should reach a minimum temperature of 18 degrees Celsius at all times and shouldn't go higher than 24 degrees Celsius at all times. So that's your comfort zone, and that's the range that we should be trying to achieve. But at the moment, we're not really achieving that in your standard house. And then we looked at ventilation. So ventilation is extremely important. If you have insulation, heating, and ventilation, then you have a very well, healthy, functioning home. If you have a healthy building, then you have a healthy family living in that house as well. Because as soon as you take away the ventilation of the house, then you don't have a healthy home anymore. You need ventilation to make sure that you don't have condensation forming on your windows. As soon as you have condensation forming on your windows, the glass in the frame, you have mold that starts to grow. With mold comes respiratory illnesses such as asthma, acute respiratory illnesses, and no one wants that. So we started looking at our first house. So all the houses are anonymous, but found it very interesting. So your first top line is your 24 degrees Celsius, which is, and then the bottom line is the 18 degrees Celsius, which is your comfort zone, according to the World Health Organization. Currently, our building code is well below that and is not recommending that, but that is what we should be aiming to work towards for healthier homes. So this first home has thinly broken aluminium frames with argon-filled glazing. It's very interesting. We made our assumptions before and saw that the bedroom frame, the most southern bedroom frame, doesn't receive a lot of sun. It's also the least heated room of the house. Was the worst performing, as we assumed. And then looking further into it, your living room glass was also the highest. But looking at that, there was also some sunlight on it, so that's why we reached the high temperatures, close to 45 degrees Celsius. So once again, thinly broken aluminium frames, argon-filled double glazing, low E-film lining, and these windows were not recessed in the walls. So once again, you can see it's majority of our findings were below the 18 degrees Celsius, and that is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to work within that comfort zone. And most of this was during the early hours of the morning when we're reaching the lowest temperature readings. And then midday when we're reaching the high readings for the living room frame and the living room glass. Looking at our second house, PVC frames with argon-filled double glazing. Very, very well-performing frames. As you can see, most of the time, it's within that comfort zone. It's within the 18 and 24 degrees Celsius, and this is exactly what we're trying to work towards. This home is one of our super homes. So they've done it all right. They've got the recessed windows into the wall, which makes a huge difference compared to the previous house that didn't have recessed windows. So something that small, that doesn't cost any more just to recess your windows, can make such a huge difference when it comes to heating your home. Looking at our third house, non-thermally broken aluminium frames with argon-filled double glazing. Poor performing most of the time. And once again, early hours of the morning and also quite late at night, but early hours around 8 a.m. is when you're seeing the lowest point being reached there for the frame, for the bedroom frame. And then once again, the highest points for the living room glass, and for the living room frame. So once again, you want majority of this in your comfort zone. So non-thermally broken aluminium is firstly where we should start making a difference. We should start having thermally broken frames because aluminium is such a good conductor that heat immediately escapes through your frame. So majority of people who I've spoken to when looking at other homes in Auckland always think that it's the problem is with the glass. So they start with changing their windows to double glazing, but they leave their windows with non-thermally broken aluminium frames, and then all your heat escapes through the frames. So these windows wind recessed into the wall and reaching temperatures close to 5 degrees, which is not what we want for healthy homes. That's when you start having condensation forming on your window glass and on your frames, and that's when you start getting mold growing in your homes. So house number 4, non-thermally broken aluminium frames with ventilated double glazing. So this is a good start with having passive ventilation within your window frame, but it's not enough to help the house to stay healthy. So most of the data is constantly out of that comfort zone. So, well, good effort with trying to start with the double glazing, but no thermally broken windows, and these windows were also not recessed into the walls. Temperatures reaching close to 5 degrees Celsius once again, and reaching a high of close to 12 degrees Celsius for a majority of the components. You get your living room glass reaching the 24 degrees Celsius, but that's the main component reaching within the comfort zone. So then we look at our 5th house, fiberglass frames with argon-filled double glazing. I was most interested in this house because there's not a lot of fiberglass currently used in New Zealand, and very, very pleased with the result as well. We also found that they performed a lot in the comfort zone as per the World Health Organization, and reached a lot of peaks for the living room glass. Once again, that was in direct sunlight, so that's a little bit for the spike there, but still performed very well and was still in that zone that we were looking for. So fiberglass frame, argon-filled double glazing, lobby film lining, and recessed into the wall. So far, all the houses that have had recessed framing have just shown that they have been within that comfort zone that we're after. So to be able to be on the same par with the rest of the world, we want to start looking at recessing our windows at no extra cost. You simply just tell your builder, hey, I want recessed windows, and you can already start looking at making a huge difference. This is once again the living room frame reaching a low of 7 degrees Celsius for that one, and it's getting better. So what we're further looking on in this research project is looking at comparing the different components within the houses. So this is a bit full on. We're still busy working on this, but this is just comparing the joint area of all the houses, and we're still deciphering it a little bit more, so it's still in the process, and we're still looking at calculating the dew points for the houses to be able to determine at what point condensation forms on the frames and the glass, so that we can actually prevent that from happening by incorporating better insulation, better ventilation, and better heating systems in our homes. But those are the three components that you need to start looking at to create healthier homes and prevent mold from growing on your windows. So at the moment we're still analysing the relative humidity data that we've also gathered, and very much looking forward to seeing what that's going to show us. So I want to say a big thank you to Bob and Nate, who's helped with recruiting the homes, and all the participants of this study who have given up their homes to be monitored for the 2 weeks. And just a big thank you to my supervisor, Professor Robin Phipps, who actually showed me how important windows are in creating healthier homes. If you don't have good windows, you can have great insulation, you can have great heating systems, but if you don't have good windows, all your heat is going to escape through your windows and you're paying extra money and losing a lot of valuable heat. Any questions?
Did you do wooden windows?
Sorry?
Did you do a wooden one?
Wooden windows? We would look for a wooden house, but unfortunately none of the participating houses were wooden. But yes, it would have been very interesting.
When you're doing the data collection, did you is the house with the heating or cooling system inside?
The super homes were, but the other two homes, no. Sorry, what was that?
What time of the year?
August this year, yes.
Are you going to publish your report?
We'll talk to Robin about that, maybe. At the moment it's looking very promising, and yeah, probably continuing those studies as well.
You haven't got any data on recessed aluminium windows?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Which ones were?
The second one.
Oh, yes.
They've got it to
Oh,
Second house is PVC.
That's PVC.
Thermally broken aluminium, not recessed. Oh,
3 was non-thermal.
non-thermally broken, not resistant to the wall.
You're right.
No, we don't. You're right. No, we don't. But that would have been very interesting. But with the still with the aluminium, you have a lot of heat transfer going through your aluminium frame, so they will probably perform very similar to these, but to the fiberglass and the PVC window frames in terms of recessing them into the wall, but they will still be not quite achieving within that comfort zone that we're after for healthier homes. And if you get thermally broken aluminum frames, that will help a lot as well already.
Thank you.
Yes?
Is your information published anywhere? Can you find this?
Not yet. We're still busy looking at the relative humidity data that we've gathered, so we're going to compare that as well, because we want to find out at what point condensation will form on the windows, because that's your main cause for health problems. Anyone else? Very good. Yes?
What's the sample size of each category? Is it possible that there is some virus?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
What's the sample size in each category?
Any sample size? So it's for 2 weeks at 15 minutes, so there's approximately 1,500 data points that we've compared. So it's taken a bit of time, but for each component, so 6 components per house.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to interrupt. We'll have questions after the next speaker, so hold your questions, and we'll hear from John. Round of applause. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Is this on? You want to introduce me?
Yeah. So, sorry, I haven't said much about John Burgess from Brains, and John's going to talk to us tonight about a really exciting research project that they're starting about, funnily enough, recessed windows. And I think it's really important work, and I think potentially the aim might be to have an alternative solution or even an acceptable solution in the building code.
Yes, that's the hope, Bob.
Yeah. So I won't steal John's thunder, I'll hand it over. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bob. Yeah. So Brand Solosage, don't know, is a Building Research Association, and we've been involved in looking at a whole lot of different building performances for a number of years. I've been involved in Windows for quite a long time. I started out, strangely enough, looking at the weather tightness of Windows, and then we had our little weather tightness fiasco, which, by the way, is why the building code has our windows outside the structural part of the home, because if your windows leak, we don't want the water going into the wall. So we can blame our weather tightness fiasco for some of our thermal problems. But the work we're doing here is trying to marry together the E2 with the H1. Some of you are nodding, you know what E2 is. E2 is the weather tightness part of our building code. H1 is our thermal part, where Bob's very active in the SUPERHOME, very active. This is... is that not? Is that any better? Yes, you can hear me at the back? You're nodding? Okay, great. So you're marrying together H1, being the thermal, with E2. So if I use those terms, they're the building code clauses. E2 is weather tightness, H1 is thermal. So the research project we're looking at is getting those things sorted. It's a bit of a boring slide, I'm afraid, but a few words to talk to. We have, as other presenters have already said this evening, we've got an issue with New Zealand Windows, and that we do have some pretty, I think the technical term, I'm a scientist, so I can talk technical. I think the technical term for Windows is crap. Thanks for that. As far as thermal performance goes. But as I said before, you may not have heard, the reason we've got such poorly performing window frames is largely because of our weather tightness leaky house fiasco from a few years ago, when the building code officials put in place something to solve that weather tightness problem, and it pretty much did. Well, some of you may not be nodding at that, but it also created more of a problem thermally for us. So we need to sort that. The issue is we have quite a complicated. Whoops. Turn back on again. The connection systems of our windows can be quite complex. The way a head flashing has to work to stop water getting in, and then your thermal barrier, your air tightness layer, your water tightness layer, they all come together at these openings. And they do create quite a difficult building physics problem. And our industry and our researchers have overcome that in a number of different ways over the years. And as I said recently, a lot of those overcoming the issues have been regarding weather tightness because of leaky buildings. So we've got solutions that are less than ideal, and as Bob mentioned, one of the outcomes of this project is we hope to be able to have a better thermally performing window solution for 80% of the market. The building code deals with, as has been said, it's the bottom level, it's what you have to achieve in New Zealand, and yet it is the one that is usually justified on a cost-benefit basis. Well, that's actually the one that over a longer term becomes cost neutral. But they don't take into account comfort, don't take into account human health impacts. Pretty hard to monetize those things. But if you just take, as Simone may have been doing, take the energy cost of heating your home versus the maintenance, versus the purchase cost, installation cost and maintenance cost of your windows, you trade those off, you work out what windows will be cost neutral or cost beneficial. But if you bring in human health issues and how many sick days you have, what the cost of hospitalisation is, the equation gets skewed quite a lot. Anyway, I shouldn't be talking about that, I'm talking about other issues up here. The whole industry is affected by these issues of how we install windows. These are the 4 things that we're looking at in this research. We've got to get the E2 stuff, the weather tightness stuff, the thermal stuff, the buildability, and durability as well. So it's all very fine getting an awesome performance out of our window thermally or from weather tightness. But if we can't get it in a year's time or 5 years' time, then it's not ideal. So, what have we got next? Obviously, from the number of people here in the room today and the amount of interest in SUPERHOME and Passive House, there's a lot of people getting more interested in the high-performing homes. And at the moment, SUPERHOME might be it's 1% at the top, thermally performing of New Zealand homes, perhaps. And a lot of this research is dealing with sort of that 80% in the middle. So I'm not, at the moment in this research, I'm not trying to promote the absolute best thermally performing windows. I'd love to do that. I'd love to, but I can't in this work. So as we've seen before, we've got a lot of heat to be going out our windows. That really depends on how airtight our homes are, how well we control moisture, what sort of heating solutions we have. And the amount of heat we lose is affected by whether you stir your air up in your room with what we've got on here, an air handling system, or with heat pumps, where you're moving the air around. That does affect what the air tightness and the way the heat goes in and out of your house. Open fires have another issue with the drafts that they create. And you're not allowed many of them in Christchurch after all, are you? Unless you've got a 2 hectare, is it 2 hectare property, you're allowed an open fire, that doesn't meet clean air regulations. Anyway, that's another topic. I'll leave that topic alone. Right, oops, I've gone the wrong way. So, over the years, the New Zealand standard NZS 41.8 has set performance levels that the building code then calls up for the thermal performance of the various aspects of a home, including floor, walls, ceiling, and windows. There's a whole lot of assumptions in that code. I did some of the work a few years ago about the thermal performance of framing, single glazing, double glazing, PVC, timber framing, etc. And so we came up with a lot of assumptions about what we would expect the R value to be for an aluminium window. And that was based, actually for all the window frame types, PVC, timber, aluminium, thermally broken aluminium, and composite. That was based on a certain size window, with a mullion down the middle, and a certain type of glazing. As you make those windows smaller, as was it Bob or no, it was Martin was saying, the effect of the frame becomes larger in comparison to the effect of the glass. So with small windows, you want really well-performing frames, and you don't really care quite so much about the glazing. But once you've got your 12-panel bifold or your big view sliders, a lot of glass, then you want your glazing to be really good, and you don't actually care so much about the frame. So there are some trade-offs there. But we always assume in 41.8, the thermal performance code, that the glass we have, or the glazing and the frames we have, actually meets those requirements of the building code. Some of them actually don't, but we call them and deem to satisfy that they should do. So in actual fact, we are getting some of our code level homes that technically probably don't actually meet code, but they've been deemed to meet it by the fact that they use certain forms. This is a concern. That's put in quite nice tame language. My colleague at Brands uses slightly more flowery language when he talks about the issues there. So I'm sorry, these were very boring slides here, especially after the last 2 presenters, but however, the goal of this work is to get some practical solutions for how we can install windows that don't take us back to those leaky home days that some of you may remember all too well. And some of my friends are still coping with the outfall of living homes that were pretty well buggered. Not in the way of the Christchurch earthquake, but in mould and rot, etc. So we want some practical solutions for how we can get the E2, that weather tightness, married together with the H1, which is the thermal, work out how we can install windows, as in some of these European solutions here, such that we can get really good thermal and really good weather tightness performance from those systems. We've got a technical guidance group which is governing us at the moment, and there's a couple of members in that in the audience who've been making sure we're doing this well, so we can get some robust solutions. And so we're very close to our first cut of some windows that we're going to put into our weather tightness testing rig at Brandt, and we're going to see how easy it is to make them leak, whether they leak to start with, and so that's the buildability issue. We're going to get a standard builder, somebody off the shelf, or no, not off the shelf, builders don't come off the shelf, but a normal builder out of the industry who's no special skills, and get him to see how easy some of these solutions are to build. We're going to test them to see whether they leak water, and whether we're going to get some. A couple of builders putting their hands up, I said here to be the off-the-shelf builders, and then we'll do some thermal modelling. It's just a bit too hard to measure them all on our rig. We can measure the thermal performance of window systems at Brands, but it's quite difficult. And the thermal modelling that Simone may know about as well is really quite efficient now, and Bob's done a lot of thermal modelling on systems. So the intention is that by this time next year, we will have some solutions that marry these things together. Now, they're never going to be the SUPERHOME solutions, because that's not where we're aiming. Remember, we're aiming at the mass market at the 80%. And the SUPERHOME approach is passive house and the topping. We're always going to be looking at, at that top strata. But we're hoping that we'll be able to influence building code levels and get the mass market into to step up a bit and have some window systems that perform thermally well as don't take us back into weather tightness problems. So there's a lot coming from this work, not a lot yet to talk about, but I guess watch this space. And we'll be feeding that back through the Window and Glass Association and the various umbrella organisations who are on our guidance group. So thanks for that. I think I've reached the end of my. Here we go. Here's the rough timeline. So we're about here now. So we've got some promising details by September. What sort of word is that? February. Okay. By February, we'll have some samples that we'll put in our small test rig, weather tightness test rig at Brown, and see what we can do with them. One of the challenges we'll have is that we want to test a few windows, but we don't really want to test Martin's windows or Joe's windows, because we want to test generic ones. Because as soon as we test something and say, oh gee, that was really good, that's not really the intention. The intention is to give everybody, or give the type of window, assess the type of window rather than NK windows or APL window. And then we'll be publicising where we've got to. So I'm just leaving you with a solution that's been derived from the E2 solution. Now, E2, the weather tightness one in the building code. This is called one of the acceptable solutions. We've modified it a bit, courtesy of Window and Glass Association. We've modified it a bit. Got some foam. Normally that's an air gap. So while there's a small amount of sealant there, it's not really going to stop a lot of air travelling sideways through there or up through the cavity. And so, as was pointed out before, we're going to end up with cold air coming all the way through here. And look, that's a 9.5mm jib. We've got cold air on one side and warm air on the other. It's jib's not really well known for its insulating properties. Sorry, Winston. But this is one of the solutions that we've been toying with. because it's very much still the E2 solution with most of the window frame outside that structural line because of our weather tightness fiasco. And it's trying to make the most of keeping the window there where builders know how to do it now. It's taken a while, but we do have an industry who knows how to do that now. Because that's also another challenge for the whole industry is changing how we do things. That's a shot from our workshop recently. The guy with the bald head is probably me. Here's an ND representative. There's a guy you might recognise there sitting in the front row. And I think Bob's not in that picture. So these are some of our representatives on our guidance group. And so we've had a lot of interest in this project. A lot of people sending us and ringing us up. The best way to do that is to come in through these guidance groups. So talk to the guys in charge of those so that we can filter all this information coming back. So thanks very much. I'll hand back to Bob, I think now.